So, new space. I'm going to try to use the rest of the house because I've been working really, really hard this last year with the wedding and everything and moving in together and just trying to create a space that felt like home. So I'm going to try, emphasis on try, to use more of the space around the house. So you're going to see different things. We are, however, in the kitchen today. Fun. So we're in the kitchen because I had to learn something recently, which is how to share your space. By recently, I meant over the last several months of my marriage, of my relationship with my husband, and so on. Why the kitchen? Well, as I've talked about in a couple of other videos, I love to cook. It is just one of my favorite things to do, to figure out how to throw stuff together with and without a recipe. I genuinely love cooking. I could do this all day if I could eat all day, but I can't quite eat all day. So, about a month ago, me and my husband celebrated our 2-year anniversary of being together as a couple. And we had this plan where we were gonna eat together. We were gonna go to one of the big stores here that had all the fancy foods and like put together a little cheese tray. We were gonna make a steak dinner. It was gonna be a big thing. Like, it was going to be us in the kitchen working together to make this meal and with all of these foods that we love to eat. That didn't quite go according to plan. We did get to enjoy the time and we did get to hang out together and we did kind of cook dinner together. And I say kind of because we are both stubborn. I know personally I am very, very particular about the way that I cook. So I have all of my things set up. I've been working on this kitchen first that tells you how much I love the way it's set up. I have everything organized, categorized. Like, I know exactly, like, I'm spinning around the kitchen, grabbing stuff, throwing things together, and it looks like chaos, but it's organized chaos. And learning to do this with my husband has been its own challenge. The reason being, he has his own way of doing things. He's got more specific foods that he likes to cook. Like, he knows how to cook potatoes really well and steaks really well. It's not so much on other more meticulous things that I do. Like, we have different ways to cook and different kinds of cooking that we do. He usually takes over the grill. I usually take over the stove, and we make a lot of really good food together. We just do it very differently. And it could not have been more obvious that day because he just kind of jumped in and like did his thing. Me, I was like, okay, we've learned in the past that we can't quite do things together. We have to do things together but separately because we will try to nitpick, like, maybe you should do this first. Or like, he's cooking potato, maybe you should peel it first, chop it first. I usually do this, or I usually do that. And we both do it and it drives each other crazy. So we've just kind of learned to step back and let each other do our own things. However, in this instance, we were just not working together. It wasn't working really well. He started boiling potatoes and then kind of left them to the side to be put together, but hadn't quite gotten to it yet. Started on something else. He has a very one thing at a time focus the way he does things. And I have everything is going at the same time. I'm mashing potatoes. This is ready. I'm going to do this and I'm going to come back and I'm going to do this. And everything's running so that way at the end of it, everything is done roughly at the same time. I've been practicing doing this for years. I used to do this when I was living at my parents' house and like cooking for them and cooking for my sisters and just getting used to cooking everything at the same time, timing everything so that way whenever the next thing needed me, I was done with the previous thing. It is a very, very difficult skill to attain and I have worked on it so hard to make sure that I got it right. My husband, however, used to do a lot of things like frozen bag foods. So he would go to the store and buy this bag of like frozen meat and potatoes or frozen pastas with sauce and everything all together, and that all you had to do was throw it in a skillet and it was ready to go. This changed when I came in because, again, I love cooking and I don't really like the way that stuff tastes. I don't know. I just not a flavor that I enjoy. And he wasn't really offended by it. He likes my cooking and is appreciative that I've taken over, but that did mean like learning new things to do together. And so since I've taken over, we don't really cook too often together where we're both trying to cook things our way. Usually what it'll be is if I'm making, let's say, I usually make carne asada, rice and beans all together as a meal, I will be working on chopping up things that go into something. So if I do the carne asada, I want to put onions in it, I want to put cilantro in it. So as the meat is kind of starting to cook, I will be chopping that up to put that in. And meanwhile, the rice is toasting and the beans are boiling. He doesn't like to just kind of leave the rice there. He likes to constantly move it. The chemist in him, it makes more sense because it cooks more, it fries more evenly. Doesn't really make a difference to me personally. So what we've decided is when he's at home, when I'm cooking, he will take over one thing at a time. So he'll just like stir it and then he'll let me know, hey, the rice is toasted, what's next? And so I'll jump in and I'll put in the rest of it and let it sit down to simmer and boil and finish cooking. And then he'll be like, hey, the beans look like they need more water. And so he kind of more keeps an eye and helps me keep things a little bit more consistent when I am cooking. I say we because it was really like oversight on both of us that we should have probably really thought about this more, but we don't usually cook together in that we are both in charge of our own things because our kitchen really isn't that big. Like this is our entire kitchen and dining room. It is one room, it is not very big, and so that means that we don't have a lot of counter space. That being said, we usually just do one at a time, and we tend to get in each other's spaces. We're both going to the sink at the same time. If there's dirty dishes, we only have one side of the sink. If like I'm trying to chop here on the cutting board, the knife block is right in front of me versus having to chop over there in this area where the knife block is not right in front of me. And oh my gosh, it can be so frustrating just to be like, you're in my space, can you move? And you're trying not to be angry or frustrated because this is the man that I love. I chose to spend my time with him. I genuinely enjoy being with him. But when we're trying to do these things, he gets on my nerves because it's like, you're in my way, I need you to move. And I'm like, hey, can you move? And he's like, I'm busy, give me a second. And then he doesn't move for like 10 minutes. And I'm like, I really need that knife because my stuff is burning. And so it ended up being a little bit of a chaos that I just ended up sitting down at the dining room table, having a drink, just watching him do his thing. Fast forward to the end of the night, we ended up forgetting a couple things, cooking things. Not everything was hot at the same time, but we got to eat and enjoy it. We had to sit down and talk at the end of this and be like, okay, so this didn't quite go according to plan. Plan was we were supposed to cook together, putting things in different places around the same time, timing together, so that way the food would all come out hot at the same time. And we both felt at fault. I should have spoken up more instead of just sitting down to take a back seat. He should have probably, been more aware that I also had things to do. There's so many things that we could have done differently that would have made it easier and more efficient in what we were trying to do. And that's just something that we have to learn. And that's something that everybody has to learn at some point in your lives, whether that be with your husband when you're getting married, whether that be with your siblings if you move in together, whether it be with your parents even when you move back into the house. I know I lived outside of the house for a while and then moved back in, and I kind of had some rhythming, like what we do in our own free time and how we handle things that we needed to relearn about each other. And for me, sharing the kitchen was one thing that I didn't think about because we work fine together. We had been doing things together, but suddenly we had that issue because we just didn't really stop to think about working at the same time in the same space versus working with one person in charge and the other person following a lead. So like usually when my husband's in charge of like cooking barbecue outside or if he wants to cook dinner, I just kind of sit and watch him and I get him things that he wants because let's face it, he never knows where anything is in the house. So he'll be like, hey, I need butter, or I need salt, or I need this, or I need that, and I just go and grab it for him. So we work together as a team when one of us is in charge. But when both of us are in charge of our own things, like you're in charge of making the steaks, and I'm in charge of making the potatoes, or whatever it is that we're cooking, we need to figure out a better way to work. Because our current solution has just been we can't be both in charge at the same time. So if I'm in charge, you just need to listen. If you're in charge, I just need to listen. And while that works, sometimes it's not a permanent solution. We need to sit down and have a conversation about talking better to each other, or talking in general. I know he's got a issue with like just sharing, and after the fact is a lot of, yeah, I probably should have said something, or I did forget, or I got carried away. And I have a lot of the same things, whereas I'm more of like a move, my thing is more important, which is not always the case, but that's just how I talk and how I do things. It's just a lot of, my thing is more important, get out of my way. And it takes over more in spaces like the kitchen, where I've begun to feel more like, this is my kitchen, this is my space, and this is where I work. And it has been a work in progress, because before it used to be, this is his kitchen, this is his house, this is where he lived because he was here first, and I just kind of felt like a visitor for a while. And slowly, we've been remodeling everything. We put like shelving up there, we have this new sidebar here, we're trying to make it feel more organized and feel more like home, and in doing so, I feel more like it's my home. However, we're still working on figuring out where our space is, because we kind of each have our own way of doing things. A lot of the stuff in the living room is still set up the way he likes it. And so I try to move things around, but I feel like I can't quite move everything around because it's his stuff and he has it a very specific way. And it's just a learning process on how to do it all together. So I've moved some things around, made it look nicer and be a little bit more cozy while not quite infringing on his space. And so we have to slowly talk about it. And I see there's comments on here about people working from home, both of you. And it can be hard because everybody has their very specific way they want things. I have this cutting board that is beautiful and I love it. And it's got rubber grips and it doesn't slip, but I always have it right here in front of me, in front of the counter, because I have my stove right here. I have my spices right in front of me. I have my cutting block right here. I've got olive oil, balsamic, like everything that I need is kind of just right here. And where my phone currently is sitting to record this is in my spice cabinet. And so everything is right here. And I have a very specific way I set it up based on what I use. There are some spices that aren't in this cabinet. They're sitting on top of the stove because they're more used spices. So I know where it's at and I have it set up a specific way. And to just let my husband take over the space to do whatever he wants to do, he's going to rearrange it and he's going to change it and he's going to move stuff and he's going to yell across the house, where is this and where is that? And I can't see it. Oh, it's right in front of you. And that's okay. And we need to work together better to slowly start making it our space. And that way we run into less of the issue of you're in my space, I'm in your space, but we're together in the same space. That's ours together. And slowly my husband's gotten used to where all of the stuff is. He's more comfortable where things are. He knows where everything is. We still have our ways that we do things differently. This whole kitchen chaos was only last month. We haven't fixed it miraculously. We just are more aware that it's an issue and that we're working on it. And slowly, as time goes on, I'm sure that we're going to master this space and get really good at working in it. And then we're going to move. Because that's how things go sometimes. You get really used to something and you get really good at it and then something changes. But what we learned won't change. What we learn is that we're working together and that we're trying to make this space ours. And I feel like it's a lot easier to talk about now because I've calmed down a lot and I'm not as angry as I was that day, frustrated getting everybody in my space. And it's also with my husband, who I know really well, who I get along with, who I feel like I can talk to. It gets more frustrating and difficult when it's somebody that you aren't as comfortable with. Maybe it's your boss. Maybe it's your sister or your brother or your cousins or other people who are not quite as close. And you have to figure out how to work with them, how to use the same space as them, how to tell them something, how to take in the critique that they give you, because that's the hardest. It's easy to be like, oh, you need to fix this and you need to fix that, but the moment they tell you that you need to fix something, you're like, oh, that hurt. I'm so sensitive. And I say that because that's me all the time. I'm constantly like, oh, that hurt. You attacked me. That was a personal attack on my honor. And I needed to learn to take things not so personally and try to apply it. And I'm usually good at applying it, but in that moment, I'm always just really sensitive about it. But I'm learning, and I'm trying to be more receptive to whenever he gives me criticism, because that's how we grow. As much as we hate being criticized and having to share our space and get used to new routines, new spaces, new situations, that's what helps us grow into better people. That's what helps us be more understanding, more flexible, more everything. And slowly it becomes easier. And I'm sure one day we'll look back and be like, I can't believe this was ever an issue. It's easier now. But in that moment, you just need to remember that everybody feels differently. I'm sure my husband thinks of this as his space too. But I think of it as mine. And we slowly need to work towards our. Thanks for listening.